Hello friends, today's lesson is how to draw a crocus. Now the point of this lesson isn't so much about how to draw a crocus as it is how do you draw something from nature. I've gone in my yard, it's early spring here, and I've picked the very first flower that blooms in our garden, which is a crocus. It's one of the very first flowers of spring. I've gone ahead and picked it, and we're going to be using that as our guide today, and I'm going to show you how to take something from your garden or your yard and observe it and draw it. So you'll need a piece of paper, you'll need a pencil. You can use my crocus as a guide as you're drawing along with me. And then I hope that inspires you to get your own ideas about how to take something and draw it on your own at home. All right, let's get started. It is the very, very beginning of spring here, and I don't have that many flowers in my yard, but I had this one today, and we're gonna practice drawing this crocus. So I have a pencil and I have my flower. Now you can use this flower as an example, or you can go and pick your own flower. But for today's exercise, we're going to use this. Now, as I'm looking at this beautiful crocus, I'm going to be thinking about the general shape that it is. So I see that the stem is at this angle, this little baby leaf is over here at this angle. I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals that my eye sees on this outside edge, and I also see some petals that are tucked behind. So I'm going to observe this flower for just a minute, and I'm going to think about the different shapes. I can see that this petal comes out like this petal comes out like this, there's a center petal right here, and some other petals that are tucked inside. I can see that the stem is a beautiful straight line, and that these leaves right here are really, this one's just at a more straight angle, this one has a curve. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and observe. Now the first thing that I do when I draw is I block in the basic shapes. Now I'm going to block in my shapes really, really lightly. So to begin, I see that my flower is at this angle, and I'm going to be looking with my eye to see the different angles that each part of the flower has. So let's go ahead and just block in that first line. Now I can see that the leaf at the bottom also comes in from this direction. And then this one on the right goes like this, and it has this little bend. I think this leaf has a bend because it looks like it was actually broken off or eaten away or something. For today's drawing lesson, I am not drawing a perfectly realistic flower. I want to get the impression of a flower. And so I'm going to be less focused on making it exactly perfect, and I'm going to be more focused on getting it to be drawn the way that I want to draw it in the shapes that I see. So I can see here, I've drawn this line to represent the very tip of that top petal that I can see here. And then I'm going to draw the very most outer parts of the outside tip. Now you can see here, this is the basic shape, and this is going to give me a reference point. So let's go ahead and start with the petals. This flower, what I love about crocuses is that the petal or the flower portion of it, you actually can't really tell where it blends into the stem. I don't know if you can see in this video, but this whitish purple actually goes all the way down. And some flowers will have the distinguishment or the delineation from the petal to the stem. This one doesn't, which makes it really fun. So I'm going to start this middle petal from the actual stem, and I'm going to come up from the stem. Remember, we're drawing really, really, really lightly. And I'm going to draw this oval shape. It has a little bit more, well, it's not as flat as I thought it was. This petal right here has this kind of a paddle shape. Sometimes it can be helpful to think of shapes in something that you're already familiar with. It almost looks like a paddle where it has more of a straight edge down here and then it tapers down. That's our center petal. Now I'm going to draw this side petal. I'm not going to draw these two ones tucked in because I want to really distinguish the outer edge. I can see that as I've drawn this outer shape that it's actually not all the way as far as it needs to go. So I'm going to draw this outer shape, but thankfully I have this curve. You can see the three-dimensionality of that outside petal. and it comes up to a point, and then because it's three-dimensional, it comes down like this. Now the same thing with this outer petal. I'm going to draw that outside shape of the petal. Flowers are really fun to draw because they are not perfect. There are so many organic variations. My eye is telling me right here that I've got to change that shape. I'm also going to make sure I don't draw too hard of a shape because, like I said, there are so many different variations. And as you're drawing, you might notice something that's a little bit different, but I'm just going to block in these shapes. Now I've got these two outside petals, but they are tucked inside a little bit more. So I'm going to just draw those in. They do not come up as high as that middle petal does. And then I'm going to draw this one in here. I looked at this crocus earlier this morning and it was actually all tucked in. It wasn't as open because it was really cold this morning and the sun was not all the way up. So I picked it right after it had opened. I can't really tell what you can see, but I can see a little bit of a petal underneath from this crocus. All right, so I've got my basic shape of this petal. Let's go ahead and finish out the stem. So this is a very, very delicate flower. The crocus is the earliest spring flower along with tulips and daffodils, and it's very, very delicate. I don't like to pick them unless I put them in a little singular vase, and they last just about a day or two, but they are really beautiful. I can see this skinny shape. Now you can see this other leaf that was just forming right here at the very base. I don't know if you can see this here, but this crocus also has another outer leaf right there that it looks like the stem, but it's actually an outer leaf just barely growing. So for the sake of observation, we're going to block that in. These leaves, I don't know if you can tell also from the video, have these beautiful lines down the middle. They're very, very delicate. Now, I think for today, we are going to just keep this black and white because I want to talk a little bit about shading. So I'm going to go back to my petals now, and I'm going to really decide what lines I want to keep and what lines I don't want to keep. So I see some lines that I don't want to keep, and those are going to be the lines that I drew as guides or that were overlapped. So I'm just going to get those in. And now I'm going to do some shading. Now the shading is going to help me know which petals are in front and behind, where the purple is and where the white is. Because it's a pencil drawing, it's going to be hard to tell what's shadow and what's color, but that's okay. These petals have very, very delicate center lines that I'm just going to barely block in. I don't want them to distract from the shape. But this one, because we are looking at it from the side, let's fix this one a little bit. So if I were to look at the outside edge, I see that outside edge right here. And then I just see this little outer leaf portion that you can see from the side. All right, so let's get shading. I'm going to start left to right. I can see in this petal that there are really, really small, fine lines of purple. It's really hard to see probably in this video, but I'm observing that the purple, that the outside of this petal has a little bit of white, and the purple actually begins with a really fine line. So my shading is going to start with those really fine lines. I'm using a very light hold on my pencil. I'm not drawing hard. I'm drawing very, very light. Now from here, I'm going to do more shading. So I'm going to move more at my wrist or more at my arm. You notice how I'm keeping my hand very stationary. I'm not going like this because we're going to get harder lines or uneven lines, maybe some more awkward shading. I'm going to keep moving from my arm so that my hand actually stays really, really stationary. And as I go down, I'm going to keep that shading really light. The edge of my petals, I'm going to keep a little darker because that's going to distinguish the outside of my petal. But yet again, I'm going to keep it very, very, very light. I can always go darker, but it's harder to go lighter, unless you erase, which of course you can do. You can see those dark lines. Now here, I'm going to distinguish a little bit more the center of that. Now as I'm drawing, I'm actually looking very little at my drawing, and I'm looking a lot at this petal because I want to observe. I want to observe this flower, and I want to learn from this flower. I could use my imagination, and I could decide how I want this petal to be shaded and how the flower should look, and that is a perfectly good exercise. But for the sake of today's exercise, I'm going to use this flower to actually tell me where the darker parts are and where the lighter parts are, because I want to learn. I want to learn from nature itself. Another exercise you could do is after this, you could draw from life, and then you could draw your very own flower, the things that you remember or the things that you liked most about observing from nature. And you can see how I'm just getting a little bit darker. Now this leaf that's back here, because it's farther back, I'm going to draw it a little bit more dark. It's going to have more shadow. Now this front leaf, this is going to be interesting because in this video you can see that this outer, I'm going to ruin it for a second. These outer leaves are actually very, very light. And the inner portion of the leaf is where a lot of that purple is, except for those inner petals. So I don't want to lose that effect. I want to keep this outside petal really light. I'm going to pause here and let you notice, right now I'm holding the pencil from way back. You can hold the pencil really close, but in order to keep a light grip, there's many ways to hold a pencil. Sometimes it can be really helpful to keep that grip really light, especially as you're doing your shading. And you want to look at the petal, but keep a really, really light hand. So I've got some color at the top, but it's still pretty light through the center. Now I can see that center line a little bit more, so I'm gonna designate it. Now, if I'm looking at the contrast between that inner petal and that outer petal, I see a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to darken that up just a little bit so that I don't have to make this center petal lighter. I'm going to make these outer ones, or the inner ones, I guess, a little darker. Now, I've shifted my petals, so it's changed just a little bit, and that's okay. Now I'm going to finish it up, and I'm going to draw attention to the lines that I want to draw attention to the most. I want my eye to see those lines, so I'm going to draw them in a little bit darker as I finish up my drawing. And now these particular leaves, can you see how there is a white center? Just like this. And this one you can't see it as much. I'm going to just shade that in. But not all the way because it's such a delicate leaf. And I'm going to draw a little bit darker at these tension points. Tension points are where, I don't know, I'm kind of making up this term, but tension points are where there is a meeting of two parts. There is a part of motion, or there's some kind of part you want to draw attention to. So as I'm drawing, I might finish up my drawing and maybe darken up the parts where I want to draw attention to the tension, literally, and think about how that affects my drawing. All right, one thing to keep in mind is you don't ever want to draw too much. It is possible to keep drawing and keep shading, and often less is more. Sometimes you can get to a point in a drawing where you don't exactly know what to do next, or you want to do more but you're not really sure. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stop because I feel like I've really gotten the essence of this crocus. And I hope you guys have learned about how to observe from a flower, and I hope this gives you guys a great idea of how you can draw your very own flower. Enjoy!